Blacksmith
This
shop, right?
portion of the building was finished in 1852. It was an era that I identify with because the drivers were such heroes, and the time. I mean, I was really born in the wrong generation. And I love, the Americana. I love everything old and American and everything. So that speedball sign, that's the Lord.
How old is the foundation under this place?
The original.
That's the original foundation?
Yeah. We've not done a true video on this and the uniqueness of that car. So if you're like, hey, I think that would be a better draw, we can just cover this car, its history. And
I feel like I'm back home again. Not in Indiana, but Iowa, Pella, Iowa. This shop, 1852 built?
1852.
Blacksmith
This
shop, right?
portion of the building was finished in 1852. It had that kind of housing portion attached to it. It'll ultimately be a one-bedroom house with a kitchen and a bathroom and all that. And the whole purpose of this was because I just live right down the street, a place that I can come and tinker. It was kind of like a lot of people wait until they're ready to retire to kind of come up with their plan of how they want to do it. And because I've maintained very high-profile collectors stuff for years. Usually they're housed in huge museums and elaborate with tons of cars. And I knew I was only going to end up with a couple cars that were kind of special to me, even though I wasn't even alive the time that they ended up finishing racing. It was an era that I identify with because the drivers were such heroes, and the time. I mean, I was really born in the wrong generation. The time of
I've
people,
said that about myself a million times.
People coming back from World War II, they had all the adrenaline from the war, and they often left during very dire economic times, and coming back, and everything was starting
Then
to
the
flow,
boom came.
and the boom, and
But
racing.
they survived World War II. Getting in an open wheel race car without a cage was nothing for these guys.
If you're
It's
sitting in a glass turret of a bomber shooting other planes, thinking that you may not come down, and every time you shot a plane, you took a pencil and put a mark to keep track of how many planes you down. I think you come back and you think, I'm not going to say strapping, because mind you, they got back from the war. We weren't using seatbelts yet, but the idea to sit in some jalopy that was 50% hand built and 50% junkyard parts, I don't think that was a scary moment for them. And it was also a time in racing. We lost a lot of drivers.
I know, but it's like we needed those pioneers to get in these race cars to get it to the next level,
Yes.
a safer level. But World War II to a race car was nothing for these guys.
No. I mean, the idea of being strapped in a car that had no real cage.
Pleasant thought.
Yeah. That was dangerous. Most of the drivers
without any gear on. I mean, you had a leather cromwell helmet. What good's that going to do?
You had those things.
There you go.
So, the idea to get thrown out of one of these things as it was catapulting through the air is probably
Which happened a lot.
a good idea. Yeah.
Which is better than staying with it and getting ragdolled to death.
Yeah,
Which is what happened to Jimmy Bryan.
So Jimmy Bryan, who of course won Indianapolis in 1958, this was given to him by the Phoenix Press Box Association, so that basically the media coverage, for being the professional athlete of the year. So over World Series or Super Bowl or anything like that, Jimmy Bryan, of course, winning that Indy 500 was a very popular Indy win.
That's a silver platter?
Yeah. You feel?
Wow, that's heavy. Phoenix Press Box Association Professional Athlete of the Year, 1958, Jimmy Bryan. So sad that 2 years later he was dead, died in a crash at Langhorne. And he was young, too. How did this come into your hands?
So there was a guy whose father inherit or got these from Jimmy Bryan, or Jimmy Bryan's estate, if you will. This was the most expensive one, and it should have been because it was, tied to his Indy 500 win. Sometimes when you're in kind of bidding wars over some of this history, there's other people, and you have to be conscientious. There's other people who want this stuff. So sometimes you kind of focus on what you really want, and let the others get the others. And it kind of goes against you and it goes for you. You can say, hey, listen, I didn't fight you for that, but I'm taking this. But, as a collector, sometimes trying to have sets of things or kind of a complete, collection of things that help tell a story, each item you win makes the next one more important. But while other people are getting restless and wanting them, it makes the next one more expensive too. So,
how about this sign? I mean, that Champion is a brand familiar to me because it was born in Toledo, Ohio, my hometown.
Yes. But it was kind of, the play on Sandlot, the kids playing baseball and the dog. And I mean, if that sign doesn't, or if that poster doesn't yell memorabilia to you, I don't know what it is. That was, that I bought framed and mounted, and I think they did a really great job. I mean, I just loved it, and I paid through the nose through that. And
really?
The gentleman who I bought
it for that one, huh?
Oh yeah, I happily paid up, and I'd pay up for it again. And I love, the Americana. I love everything old and American and everything. So that speedball sign, that's the largest of the speedball sign that I've ever or anyone's seen. That was a company that never made it out of the Depression era.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's orange soda?
Orange. They also made a grape soda.
Ooh, my favorite.
And I love Depression era grape and soda signs. I have tons of them upstairs, so kind of collect anything I can get a hold of.
This 1852 original Blacksmith shop is now your man cave restoration, cave, renovation. I mean, it's so cool. When you first saw this place, was it instant for you? I got to have this space. I got to have this.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw this, at the time it was just a 2-bedroom apartment. This originally was the Blacksmith shop. That was the housing side of it, but they'd converted this. There was a Murphy bed over there and a little kitchen island here, and half bath, if you will. I mean, it was a full bath squeeze and a half bath room. I mean, RVs have bigger bathrooms, but the reality is that when I saw this. By the time I was able to actually convince the guy to sell it, the gentleman who owned it, his father, as well as one of the other descending families of Pella Corp, they were both enormous preservationists. They saw so much in this town. So much of what you see in the downtown, they were responsible for preserving. So Robert Klein was the gentleman who saved this building. And when Robert passed away, his son Bobby inherited it. And Bobby's a lovely man and really wants to do his father proud, and he did. So it was very hard for him to let go of this building. I don't necessarily know that it was like a big moneymaker thing for him, but I think it was more of he wanted to make sure that what his father started out to do was carried on. And when you just get somebody coming up and saying, hey, I'd like to buy the building and this is what I want to do with it, you really don't know. So I think the fact that year after year after year, we would call him and talk to him about buying it. I don't know if we wore him down or he just said, well, clearly this person's got the passion or tenacity or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
it was.
You are the perfect guy to carry it on because you are a preservationist.
Yeah, I'm a preservationist, and now when I see him, he always has kind words, and he'll pop in and see what we're doing and enjoy it, and so I think he knows that it went to a good home and all that, and we'll continue to work on the building, but never take it to a point where it's overly perfect. I mean.
Yeah, you don't want to take the character out. And start putting drywall up and.
Yeah, we took layers and layers and layers of that off with insulation and foam board and all that, and the thing is like when you're restoring cars, for example, it's kind of what I do. Well, restoring and preservation.
And there is a clear difference between restoration and preservation.
Huge.
I want to define that here.
Yeah.
Is this really an original floor, do you believe?
Yes.
Reaching back to 1852?
Yeah, this floor is original.
Oh, that's very rare that you'd have an original wood floor going back. I know you've got old wood floors in Victorian homes across America, but it would be very rare that one reaches back to 1852. That's pre-Civil War.
Yeah.
And these beams.
So these are hand-hewn walnut beams that came from right behind the founder of the town was Scholte's estate, his house that he built, and there was a grove of black walnut trees. So that's where these beams originally came from. Just harvested here. This town was still town was still very new. So when this building was put up, those marks on that column there were the brands from the blacksmith, and what he'd do is the forge sat right there, and he'd make a branding iron, and he'd strike it into that beam.
So those are 1852 autographs.
Yes, yeah, it's basically a signature of what it was, and to kind of get into a little bit of the history of why that is an important thing. So in 1852, we'll just say that as a moment in time here, this was prairie land. There were a few homes starting to go up, obviously, this being one of them. I mean, you didn't necessarily have to have hundreds of acres to have farming. You could have had a little building like this with a 6,000 square foot lot or a 3,000 square foot lot. Often these were 9,000 square foot pieces of land that each building was put on, and then you could sell some of the land off, and they'd make it smaller. But so that being said, you could have just a few thousand square feet of cows to make milk or what have you. But because this was prairie land, and I mean prairie land, you didn't see any of the trees you saw that are here now. Wood was very short supply, and we were far away from everything. So the grove of black walnuts that existed back there was specifically for doing things like this, making necessary furniture. It was never going to be building a fence. You did not build fences. So fences did not exist to keep the livestock in. So very often the livestock could just be kind of roaming around. So the brand, to be able to identify the cow, was a very important thing, to know whose livestock was whose. You weren't going to put up thousands of feet of fencing when that wood would build a bed, several beds and several doors and several that's why so many of the early homes in this town were brick, if you will. As time went on, they can bring in material from up the Mississippi or what have you. But
just briefly, the town you live in here, Pella, Iowa.
Yeah.
Now, I'm a big fan of small town America. I love small town America. I think my channel would be all about small town America if I thought I could survive on it. But not everybody thinks like I do. But this is one of the prettiest small towns I've ever seen anywhere. Prettiest, nicest, cleanest, well preserved. I know you are very active in trying to preserve Pella, Iowa. In fact, you saved a turn-of-the-century home, a 1900s home that was going to be demolished. Yeah. You paid to have that home moved to an empty lot that you purchased so you could save that home. I guess I want people to understand the preservation part of you. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people who restore, and I have incredibly great friends that do some of the world's most beautiful restorations, and the car, and I do cars that go up against them, and mind you, I'm not against restoration whatsoever, but we also have to find a perfect balance of making sure we keep some stuff for preservation. I could build a brand new house to look like it's been around for 150 years. You could rebuild a home that looks that way. It's not a big deal. The problem is that it'll never last as long, because quite frankly, the materials that are made today to build homes are nowhere as good as the materials that were made for a building like this. Because the beams weren't made of rough-hewn walnut.
Well, and because the wood back then was old growth wood, so it had very small grain structure, very tight grain structure. And a 2x4, when this house was built, was 2 inches by 4 inches, and now is 1 3/4 inches by 3.5 inches. I mean, it's not even a true 2x4. So take a home and go, well, you've got whatever mathematically comes out to maybe 30% less wood mass or something, and much coarser grain structure. So when you look at the end of a piece of wood, it doesn't have as many rings. So structurally, that piece of wood is nowhere near as strong as the wood was back in this time. And the square nails had a grip effect that a round nail doesn't have. So whether it's the reason of cost of building, whether it's the reason of the materials, at the end of the day, you don't see new homes lasting like you can preserve an old home. Well, that. This car is, quite special because of who drove it. And it's a Dreyer, that's special. But this car is special because it was such a pioneering car.
Yeah, we're going to get to that. You were born in California.
Yeah.
You grew up and lived the majority of your life in California. Why did you move to Pella, Iowa?
Come on in.
Hey, how are you?
You don't know, comes in every year for Knoxville Nationals. If you don't know him, this is the great Shane Carson. Pleasure.
Whoa.